All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Seth Paskin, and I'm the host for this latest iteration of our Best Practices webinar for digital service operations here at BMC. Today's topic is going to be migrating custom views and views from version 10x to version 11.x in TrueSight capacity optimization. Your presenter will be Mike West, and we'll bring him on just here in a second. A little housekeeping, this meeting is being recorded, so if you have any objections to that, now's the time to leave. And the recording will be made available via the community's event invite that I sent out previously. And I'll do that in the next day or two after this recording. So if you have to drop off or if you have any audio issues, then please feel free to drop, and I'll make sure to get you the recording. You can email me and at Seth_Paskin@bmc.com with any questions, comments, or concerns. I invite you, if you are interested in participating as a presenter, to please send me topics that you would be interested in covering, and we can try to make that work. And then finally, two other things. One is we are doing our community's survey for this year. The biannual community survey. So if you are active on communities, please make sure to take the survey and let us know how we're doing and what we can improve. And then finally, the slides that Mike is going to show you here shortly will also be made available after the event. All right, with that, I am going to go on mute, and I'm going to let Mike take over. Mike, do you want me to present from my screen, or do you want to present the slides from your screen?
Oh, I'll present from my screen, please.
Okay, let me go ahead and make you presenter then. Sorry.
No worries. Share screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Let me just bring up the slides first.
Yes, we can.
Thanks. Let me minimize some of these things that might be blocking my screen. Okay, great. Let me just turn this on. All right, so good morning. This is Mike West. I'm part of the Platinum Engineering Group. I'm actually a product architect. And I wanted to go through today the best practices for migrating custom views. I think what you'll see from this presentation, although we will talk about some of the tools that are out there to help facilitate the migration of your custom views, it's more about planning for the custom view migration and putting a process in place so that you can ensure that the views that you have in your previous releases up until 10.7.01 get properly migrated to the presentation server or the TrueSight console, where they will start taking on the new look and feel of the TrueSight console brings to the product suite. So it's very important to plan this out. Certainly there's level of difficulty will vary. I'm going to go through what I consider a typical example. There are some other examples which might involve a lot more coordination, perhaps planning, even redesign. What I suggest is, as you start looking at your migration process, utilize communities to solicit and ask for some additional maybe practices or advice on how to choose the right templates, how to format your data marts in order to achieve the results that you're looking for. The other thing I want to mention too is we're going to start with a migration process that's going to involve 10.7.01, because that's the last version we have of LifeRay, and show how to migrate that over to a 10.7.01 presentation server. However, many of the features that probably you're most interested in might be in a more recent version of the product. So in that case, once you finish the migration to the 10.7.01 presentation server, you'll want to look at upgrading and then perhaps reconfiguring some of the templates so that you can take advantage of some of the new features, which I'll just briefly mention, which include the ability to do a multiple selection for filters. Also, there's the business driver templates, which are available in 11.3.01 that came out recently. And we also have the ability to do chaining filters, so you can do multiple filters that impact the contents of other filters, as well as multiple tables per page. So as I said, some of this process is going to require a lot of planning up front so that you can determine, so what do I want to get addressed in the initial migration, and how do I want to refine these views as I upgrade to more recent releases. So anyway, this is just a suggestion in terms of how to approach this. So the important thing is to make sure you have a good test environment. You don't really want to do this in a production. I'm sure you could probably do this in a production and go over well in some cases, depending on the complexity of views, but I think we always recommend that you use a test environment so that you can set up the views, and then once you're done, you can migrate those or move those over to production environment. Whether it stays at 10.7.1 or you upgrade the production to 11.3, then you can import those into 11.3 and then do some refinements. There's a migration tool. I'm going to introduce this tool. I know it's been around for about a year now. We're going to briefly show how to use the information from the tool. There's two parts to it. There's the analysis, which I think is the most important part for your planning. But then there's also a template that's created. I will use the template, but that doesn't preclude you from actually going from scratch if you want. When I say scratch, I mean to create the views using the existing templates without using the skeleton package that we create. Because maybe you just want a new workflow. I mean, you like the old workflow, but with the new templates that we have in the presentation server, you want to come up with a different workflow. So as long as the analysis tells you the types of data marts you need to create, where you need to define columns that will be filters, whereas before they were maybe custom selection template portlets. With that information in hand, you may end up not using the skeleton and just go ahead and creating from scratch. Since I did a creating custom views demonstration earlier, I think it was about a month or so ago, I'm not going to create it from scratch. I'm actually going to use the skeleton, but you don't have to use a skeleton. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there are some advanced topics which we won't be able to cover here, but you can start dialogue on the communities, and where necessary, you can engage with product support and product management if there are certain features that you saw before that weren't available now, and if there's not a best practice for implementing it. Certainly we can look at where it falls in the roadmap. So like I said, I'm going to use the migration tool. So let me just explain a little bit of the process of how you can use a migration tool, even if the end result is a report generation and not necessarily the view conversion, even though I'm going to demonstrate both. So getting to 10.7.01 environment is probably the most important step. Now, if you have no custom views that need to be migrated, this whole demonstration and probably presentation is not interesting to you. You don't have to stop at 10.7.01 to refactor your views and then move on to the newer releases. You can, following the right upgrade paths, move on from whatever your version is to 11.3 without doing this. So this is really for those that really want to or have to migrate existing custom views. So first thing you want to do is you want to export the custom views from your existing portlet. And then we're going to run it through the tool, the view migration tool, to produce a report. We'll analyze the report. Depending on the output of the report, we'll load in the skeleton package, at least for this demonstration, back in the CO so that you can see what the initial framework looks like. And then we'll implement the remaining actions that are outlined in the HTML report.
Hey, Mike, we have a question from Omar.
Sure.
Just quickly, how do you define custom views? Is it anything that I've created from scratch or only those sitting in the custom views section?
Good question. That's anything you create from scratch. So you may have migrated, bad word. You may have moved the view or put it in a different group. Maybe you called it your personal group, or you may have put it under one of the out-of-the-box views groups. But anything you create from scratch, any artifact you create on your own or with services assistance is considered a custom view. Okay. Okay, so let me talk about the example we're going to use here. So in the previous session, we started with creating a custom view dealing with identifying idle systems. I'm going to use the same example for this, so we don't have to spend too much time in terms of the use case. But just so you get caught up on the use case, this is an example where we look at AIX platforms, and we're trying to identify systems where CPU usage is greater than is less than 5% for more than 2 weeks, or it's offline for more than 2 weeks. And the consideration period is 30 days. So these are the data marts that were created. The top two, the materialized data marts, are the data marts that are already built for my custom view in the old portlet. And then the thing marked as template called on demand is going to be an example of a SQL query that I had embedded inside the custom view, which I need to now make into a template. At least that's the advice we're going to get from the migration tool. So we're going to talk about how to make that a reality. Okay, so that's the example. So let me, I didn't want to go there. How did I get there so fast? Okay, so let me go ahead and take us on our tour. So the migration tool, where do we get the migration tool? So on the communities, and this will be all part of the presentation, there's an existing post that you can go and download the migration tool. It's a zip file, and the contents of the zip file is a batch routine called bulkconverter.bat, as well as a PDF file that explains how to run the tool. Okay, so you'll have that available for you. I've already downloaded the zip file and I unzipped the contents. And what I ended up doing, let me see, I'll show you, give you a different view, is I've exported from TSCO the original view. The original view, let's go and take a look at what we're trying to emulate, looks like this. So it's under the custom views, but like I mentioned, it could be anywhere. And it's called IDA System Demo. It has a domain selector, so I want the ability to specify which domain I want to look at the data. It has a OS selector, which happens to be a multi-select selector, although in this case there's only one element, so maybe not so interesting. And then we have a table, which is showing all of the idle offline systems. And this inside of this table, and I'm actually going to show you through the HTML rather than editing this table, there's a embedded SQL, which actually, let me just show you. So it kind of helps you with some familiarity with what you've done in the past. So when I go inside this table, you'll see that I've inserted custom SQL data mart. So it's really just a custom SQL is embedded in here. When we run the migration tool, it's going to advise that we move this into a data mart itself, a data mart template, so it can produce fresh data, but still a data mart because all of the communication between the TrueSight console and the application server is now done via REST APIs. So it's no longer the case that you would write the query directly within the view itself. Benefit of that is that you can reuse the queries for other views. And the data mart wizard allows you to define characteristics of these columns so they can be used for filtering, as well as defining units so that you can, determine the right display for units in your environment. So this is what you might be familiar with, and this is considered a summary page. Summary only because I've done some type of analysis over a period of time, in this case 30 days, and produced some results. Now, from this page, if I select the link, I drill down. Let me get out of the edit mode so it's look a little cleaner. I drill down into some a detail page, which shows me CPU utilization, memory use, as well as file system use. Now, the only difference between the CPU one and the memory, as well as file system, is one of them, the CPU is actually a system analysis portlet, and then the other two are analysis viewer portlets. The analysis viewer portlets, if you're familiar, refer to an analysis that's in your workspace that you built. Again, with TSCO, since we're using REST APIs, we don't really have the ability to reach back into the workspace to get the analyses. So I've done this on purpose just so we can demonstrate that you can continue to use sort of information that you build in the workspace, but instead of using a portlet, you're going to using the analysis portlet, you're going to end up using an analysis template. So I'll show you briefly how to create one of those for this demonstration. Okay, so I'm going to disable this, ignore that. I think that's the only other unique features from this. So key things, we're using analysis portlet as well as a system analysis portlet. We also have multi-selection. We have a back button here that needs to be linked between the two pages. And we have a domain filter. Fairly typical, I think, but it uses some things that I've seen in many customers that are looking to migrate. These end up being about 80 to 90% of the work. Now, so with that in mind, I've already downloaded the tool and put it in a directory. So I'm just going to go ahead and run the tool. You'll see it's command line driven, so it's just a simple script. And then we take a look at the results. So this is probably the most important aspect, because this is from the results is where you just make a decision in terms of what work is required. Forget about complexity, low, and how much is migrated. That's interesting, but probably not so interesting that you can avoid to look at the rest of the information. So here it tells you there's an index. It gives you a summary, page details, how many custom data marts is identified, as well as the number of analyses that it identifies. It will give you an idea of what portlets are involved and which ones are deprecated or dropped. In this case, I have the page parameter messages, which you didn't see, or if maybe you were looking quickly, you might have seen. The page parameter messages was used to set the, in my case, to set the default time frame for 30 days. So now, even though this has been dropped, I have the ability within the data mart to specify the time frames that it's really of interest. So that's just one thing to take note of, that even though this is a dropped portlet, it actually has a, the ability is still possible within the data mart definitions. Taking a look at the...
Hey, Mike, this is Seth. We've got another question from Candace. Do we still have access? Do we still have access to analyses created in Workspace at version 11.3 in TSCO?
Right. So that you won't be able to directly access them. However, what you would do with the analysis is you'll create an analysis template, which I'll show, and then save that template. And then whatever you set configured for the analysis that's now in the template, you can access from either the system detail page or from the Data Explorer pages. So we'll demonstrate that. So idle system has two different things that are kind of warning state. One is the OS selector and the table, so the data mart table. So we take a look at the data mart table. It's saying that it can't be fully migrated because we have inline SQL. Because we have inline SQL, we're going to need to create a data mart to store that SQL. So that's one of the first things we'll do as part of this demo. The next thing that it's suggesting is that we have an OS selector that is actually also using inline SQL, but in this case, we're using it as a filter. So rather than creating a custom selection, we can go ahead and define which column would be the filter within the table and then apply it. So the second thing we would do is when we create the data mart is define, the columns so that we can pick which column would be a filter within the tool. So let's go ahead and take care of, let's see, what other areas? I think those are the main areas. Okay, so yeah, so the other things is to look at the system profile. You'll see that we're using analysis viewer, which goes to the other person's, Candace's question. So we need to be able to create an analysis template to refer to the analysis viewer. We'll do an example of that. And then we also have the HTML, that's it, really, the page parameter messages. Okay, so you may have more messages in this than what you see here. So you just need to take the time to review the messages, catalog the changes, and then prepare to make the changes. So let's take the first advice, which is basically to go ahead and create the data mart. So I'm going to go ahead and select all text. I'm going to copy it. Then I'm going to go back to the capacity console. And we're going to go to the administration section, and we're going to go to advanced reporting data marts. Since it was inline SQL, that meant that every time I executed this, it would always give me a new result. So I'm not going to materialize this data mart because I want, assuming I did a good design in the first place, I'm going to go ahead and create it as a template rather than a materialized data mart, because the behavior would be similar to my inline SQL as before, even though I'm doing it as a data mart and defining it in the works in the administration section. So we want to make sure it's a summary because I'm doing a summary for this, and we want to make sure it's available for the capacity console, TrueSight console. We'll go ahead and give it a name, but first let me copy in the query. All right, I'll call this K-West Fizz idle temp. Actually, I'll just call it idle template. Cut out some of the text.
Quick question: are you creating that data mart in 10 or 11? Which version?
I'm creating it in 10.0, 10.7.01. Excuse me. Because one of the first steps I mentioned is when you upgrade to 10.7.01, you want to make sure you prepare the data marts as well as the views so that you can do the migration to the TrueSight console. Once you've done this migration, you finish the data marts, then you can go ahead and upgrade to your more recent versions. So we'll do next. There's a couple things in here that we're being asked to define, and I'm just going to define it real quick, just so that I can have a sensible set of metrics once I go ahead and add this to the view. So I'm just going to pick something that's fairly similar, so I can get an actual metric assigned to this, unit assigned to this, and then I'll do the same thing for the online. And you'll notice, and we mentioned this in the previous presentation, that any metric that's recognized by the system will automatically try to assign a value to it that's based off of an existing TSCO metric. So things like CPU num is already mapped to number of CPU cores, same thing with CPU utilization. So when you create your data marts, it's sometimes useful to make sure the names of the columns map a metric within TSCO so we can go ahead and do some of this work for you. So this is going to be a template data mart. So we're going to hit finish, and we can do a preview. And we should be able to see the two candidates that we saw before in the portlet views, which we hope to see now in the TSCO, in the TrueSight console. Okay, so I defined my data mart. Now, since the only other complaint was really where's the screen? Was the filtering and the page parameters. I'm actually in a decent position that I can actually run the migration tool. Maybe I already ran it, and also import the package in. So I'm deciding to go with the package because it seems to be fairly well-contained changes. So I'm going to go over to the capacity console, and then we're going to go down to the views page. So I'm going to go ahead and select views. I'm going to import a view, and so we're going to import the package that's available. I'm going to select the skeleton view package and open it up. And we're going to upload it. Okay. Usually this takes a few seconds, maybe up to a minute to finish. You'll see that, at least in the registration piece, we've identified idle system demo and we've assigned it to the TrueSight console. Okay. While it's refreshing, let me go ahead and work on the other advice that I skipped, which is the analyses. So remember, there was two analyses that it doesn't have access to: file system used and memory used. So what I'm going to do is, with file system used, I'm going to edit it. There's a couple of attributes that need to be set so that it becomes possible to save this as a template. The main one being in the chart options, you want to make sure that you select the chart split to be a single chart. Because it wants to allow all entities that you select, whether it's a single entity or multiple, to appear within the chart when you go into the TrueSight console. So it allows for both group as well as a single representation of entities. So assuming that that's been confirmed, what you do is you go to Save as Template. You give it a name. Let me just call it K-West and call it file system used. All right. I want to make sure that it's used in the capacity console and the TrueSight console. So I want to change the template uses to TrueSight console. And then the other recommendations I just would keep. I want to keep the metric. I don't care for it to tell me what business drivers or systems to use. And then the other things can be left alone as well. So I save this. Oh, I guess I need a description, yes. And now I've created the template for the file system. So let me go ahead and create the template for memory used as well. K-West, mem used, no. And then I want to put this into the capacity console and TrueSight console. Now I have both templates defined. Now to find your templates, you go to the template management section under administration, you go find analysis templates, and then you can confirm that your templates are there. K-West. Okay, and we see that we have our templates. Okay, so now let's go on to probably the more exciting part, which is being able to see our views. So let me refresh this a bit and build the rest of the view out. Okay, I guess that's refreshed. Let me go ahead and first confirm that my view has been imported. So we have here, newly imported as of today, 11/25. We have our idle system demo custom view. If I go select custom views, I guess this is not refreshing. Just 1 second. Yeah, let me just do the nuclear option.
Hey, Mike, while you're doing that, we've got a couple thoughts.
Sure.
The existing analyses, and she wanted to know, are you saying that the existing analyses that are inside of her 10.7.01 workspace will no longer be viewable and you'll have to recreate them inside of?
No, you don't have to recreate them. So you would take the existing analyses and then you would save it as a template. Now, most cases, the analyses, depends on your analyses. So if your analyses is adding, the ones I use are very basic. It was just charting a single metric. If all you're doing is charting a single metric, then you don't really have to refer to analyses at all. You'll see in this demo that you can just pick the metric from the list and it will display it. However, analyses are pretty powerful. They allow you to do things like show forecasted metric with the actual metric. You may want to add custom statistics and have them shown, although we have the ability to add that in 11.3 directly. There's some advanced features you may want in your analyses. If that's the case, you don't have to recreate your analyses. You may have to modify your analyses to get the number of charts, the chart split to say single chart. But all you have to do from that is save it as a template, as I did in the demonstration earlier. And now that template will be available for you to select as you finalize or build out or create a new view. So it's not true that you have to that you have to create a new ones or anything like that.
Great.
Okay, so this is the skeleton package. As you can see, there's disclaimers. In the end, we're going to just delete this stuff. But you'll see it created two things. One is the summary page, and I believe it's using the summary template. And then you have the system profile page, which actually is giving me two options. I can use a Data Explorer, or I can use the system detail. So I'm going to only choose one of those options, probably the Data Explorer. So let's work on the first page. So you'll see it already created the table for us. So let's go ahead and edit the page. Okay. Now we're going to select the data mart. So as you remember, we created a new data mart called KWest Idle Template, and so we're going to use that as the data mart for us. We also had a requirement of using a custom selector. So I'm actually going to select the custom, instead of using custom selector, I just pick the column I want to filter on, and that will become my filtering criteria. Now, the next thing we want to do is fill out the table. So when we open up the table, you'll notice that all of the information that was previously shown in the portlet style is now here based off of what the data mart is presenting, as well as the mapping of the information from within the template package. So it might save you a little time by doing this if you didn't create it from scratch, because it's taking this from new, but you do have to modify some of these. So I'm going to call this idle and offline systems, or servers, whatever. And then I'm going to modify the real memory used so that I can define it as a number. And because it's a number, I want to display it in things like gigabytes. And then say done here. Probably want to modify CPU cores too, so there's a number as well. Only in this case, I don't need to do anything with measurements. And then finally, for this particular table, I want to make this as gigabytes as well. Okay. So this, what we're doing now is we're just really refining the view to map to the remaining stuff. As you can see, it gave you, seems like it's producing some results. I want to save this. Okay. And so now I have at least my initial summary page. One thing I forgot to do, or at least as part of this process, I want to verify, is in the table we have a link to a different page. So I want to go back here and make sure I define, or that it is linked to a page. In this case, it's linked to system profile, so that's been confirmed. Okay, save that out. So now we can go to the system profile page, and here, like I said, I'll delete the other part later, but we're just going to use the Data Explorer approach. So here I'm going to edit this page, and you also notice there's only one chart because only the analyses, system analyses was provided, imported directly. The other two we had to create templates for. So I'll just call this profile. And then, yes, so this was actually created for us. So we're all set there. So because we did in the system, system analyses, it already pre-selected the CPU utilization. So now let's configure memory as well as file system. So here, this is where I pick my template. So before you would come in here for the analysis viewer, you would actually pick and navigate through the workspace. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the template that was created, and we'll use this memory use template. As you can see, this is a basic one, so there isn't a lot of else going on. I really could have just picked the metric if I wanted to. But my analysis presumably can have some additional work embedded in there. So I'm going to use the analyses. I'll apply it, okay? And then we'll go ahead and do the file system one. Using the same approach, find my file system analysis template. That's it. And then apply it. Okay, so let's save this. Okay, and so we're almost there. So we want to be able to embed the system profile within the idle system. This other tab we would delete at a later point when we have time. But we want to embed the system profile underneath the idle system so that it has the navigation we had before. So what we're going to do is edit the view. I'm going to take system profile. Maybe it's this one. Save it. Nope. View. Pretty sure it's this guy. Interesting. All right, so let me go ahead and just save this. I think there's something I need to look at there. So when I select this link, I should be able to go to a full page view of system profile. Okay, and so that takes me to the sheep utilization side, and okay, I linked it to the wrong system profile. So let's go ahead and modify this. Edit page. Go back to the server name, and I find that it wasn't this system profile that I need, but in fact a different one.
So Mike, we're running really long. I just want to double check where we're at in the.
Yeah, we're maybe a couple minutes away.
Okay.
Let me apply this, save this, and now when we go and do the link, we are linked up to the one that has the analysis views. So just to bring us back, now there's some artifacts that were left around that we need to clean up. The disclaimer, this additional system profile, container page, probably need to clean up the other system profile tab. But using the template, it's more of a refinement of the results. The other option would be to just stand up side by side so you remember the navigation workflow of your old view and just kind of map like you're creating a new view but using this as a pattern. But again, the information that's contained in the analysis from the migration tool is an important step, an important part of helping you make the decisions in terms of completing your view. So once you've done the migration in 10.7.01, then the next step would be, if you're upgrading to a newer release, would be to take the view package, which is now, which was before, of course, saved in the views section. So saying that we've cleaned this up and we've blessed this view, you can export this TrueSight console one and then import it into your 11.3 environment or upgrade this to 11.3 directly. And then make additional refinements in case you needed to do a custom selection when it's only introduced in 11.3.01 to do multiple selection, I mean. Okay, so in terms of resources, communities is perfect for this. We have people out there providing guidance when asked on which templates to use, how to pick the specific views. We also have YouTube, which tells you how to create the custom views. Tons of information out there. We have this link to the View Migration Toolkit, which has documentation on how to run it, although you saw it was really just basically run the command, but it tells you also how it picks the various artifacts that it does in order to come up with the package, skeleton package, but more importantly, it produces the analyses that you can look through and see, do I have to create a new data mart? Do I need to start picking columns that will be used for filtering? Do I need to take an analysis that was referred to directly and now create an analysis template? Those questions would be answered by reviewing the results of the migration tool. With that, Seth, were there any remaining questions we didn't cover?
There are. I'm going to follow up with most of them, but there is one. You need to use the migration tool on custom views that were created in the presentation server, or only use it on ones created in the TSCO console?
Yeah, only for the ones that were created in the TSCO console. You don't need to use a migration tool for something that's already on the presentation server. Its direction is to help you move from the old style portlets to the new style UI. If you wanted to build something in 10.701 in a presentation server and you want to move it to 11.3, you just export it like you would any other view and then import it into 11.301.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll follow up. I'll follow up on some of the other ones, some of the other comments and questions individually afterwards, and maybe we'll post them on communities. So Mike, thanks so much. For everybody who attended, thank you so much for attending. I hope this was of value. I hope that the technology of the WebEx worked for you and you were able to hear clearly and see clearly. As a reminder, we do this every 2 weeks. Topics rotate and vary, and on the calendar as well as in communities, you can see past events. So Mike referred to his previous webinar where he actually talked about creating custom views. You can go watch that recording, ask questions, and engage as you wish. So thanks again, and have a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are. And with that, I'll end the meeting.